this video is for the multi-step graphing lesson 5 for unit 5 practice. So we'll just do a few problems on the practice here. Number 1 just asks us to identify the transformations that occurred for each function. So I start with number 1. I start from the left, and I start on the left with a negative. That negative in front of the entire equation means that you reflected over the x-axis. If you reflected over the y-axis, that would be a negative inside the parentheses. Next, we have 2/5. Now, 2/5, the absolute value of that is less than 1. So 2/5 here is a vertical compression, and you can just say by 2/5. So my graph flipped upside down over the x-axis. It compressed, it got shorter. Now the -1 inside the parentheses means that your graph went right 1 unit. And that's it for number 1. Number 6 is the next one. They want you to write an equation given the transformations. So we're going to start with a vertical compression by 1/2. Okay? When I compress, I want the number in front of the parentheses to be less than 1. So it's just going to be a 1/2 in front of the entire equation. Next, I'm going to reflect over the y-axis. Well, when I reflect over the y-axis, that's a negative in front of the x inside the parentheses. All right, then I always have to have a squared outside of my parentheses. And shifting down 2 means outside on the end, I'm going to do a -2. And that would be your equation. All right, the next problem here is number 7. You're given 2 equations. The blue one, the one at the origin, is your parent function. We're going to list the transformations that we think happened and then write the new equation. So the first thing I notice is that this graph is upside down, meaning the purple graph has been reflected over the x-axis. So when it's upside down, we're flipped over. The next one, you should notice that when I look at the parent function here, usually my pattern is I go out 1 box, up 1 box. Well, on my purple graph, I go out 1 box, down 3 boxes. So because I'm going down 3 is 3 times as large as 1, so I have a vertical stretch by 3. So my graph was flipped upside down, it was stretched by a factor of 3. Now I can also see that my graph moved left 4, and then up 6. So let's write an equation. We're going to start with y equals. Now the reflecting over the x-axis, that's a negative in front of everything. The vertical stretch by 3 means I have to put a 3 in front of the parentheses, but after the minus sign. Left works inside the parentheses here. You're going to have an x. Now left here is going to be a +4 inside the parentheses, and up 6 will be a +6 outside of the parentheses. All right, we'll do number 8 together, and then we'll do number 10. All right, so number 8 is similar. I'm starting with the parent function here. I'm going to list the transformations. It doesn't look like the graph was reflected at all, but it does look like my graph went to the right this time. It looks like it went right 4, and then down 4. All right, so I went right and down, but also if I notice, if I look at this graph, remember my parent function, the pattern is out 1, up 1. Well, here from the vertex, if I go out 1, I'm not going up a full box. I can't tell how many I'm going out, though, from that first dot. So let's look at dot number 2. On my parent function, if I go out 2, I go up 4. On my new graph, if I go out 2 boxes, I go up 1. That's less, which means we're going to have a vertical compression. Now 1 is 1/4 of 4. So we compress by 1/4. When I write this equation, I start with the compression. I don't have a reflection here, so I'm going to put the 1/4 in front. We did go to the right, so you're going to have your parentheses with the x, and going to the right 4 is going to be a minus 4 in parentheses, and then down 4 is outside with a minus. All right, last one, number 10. I have negative 1/2 x squared plus 3. We're going to list the transformations and then graph each one step by step. Well, let's start with the minus in front. That means that you reflect over the x-axis. Okay. Then we have a 1/2. The 1/2 there is in front of the parentheses, which means you have a vertical compression by 1/2. And then finally, the plus 3 on the end means you're going to take that graph and move it up 3. So you're given the parent function if you need to darken in the dots to see. You can take each of those dots to start and reflect over the x-axis. That's the horizontal axis here. So everything just goes upside down. If you need to pause this video to make sure that you plot those points correctly, go ahead. So there's my reflected. Now when I vertically compress, I'm going to change the y values of this graph and make them half as big. So here the first y value is at 0. That doesn't change when I multiply it by half. But the next two underneath are at y equals 1. Half of 1, or negative 1, I'm sorry, is negative 1/2. So my next dots are going to be at negative 1/2. Here my y is at negative 4. Well, half of negative 4 is negative 2. So we have 2, negative 2. And then my last point is at negative 9. Half of negative 9 is negative 4.5. So once I graph those, there we go. I can see my graph looks a little bit wider than what I started with. So I'm going to redarken in those points just so we can see them here in a second. Finally, up 3, well, I'm just going to take each point and go up 3 with it. 4.5 up 3 will be negative 1.5. There we go. And we should be able to have a graph like this. If you're having trouble with this one, either check the key on Canvas or ask your teacher for some help. But after this lesson, you are all set for the test review.